If you follow me over on Instagram, you may have seen some little time-lapse videos of improv blocks popping up. It's something I've been working on and off, and I've found it to be just really delightful. It's a great break from the kind of planned, measured blocks that I often make. Several people asked for a tutorial, which seemed kind of hard to do since improv is so personal and spur of the moment. So what I thought I would do is just bring you along and show you how I do a couple blocks. One of the things that I find most helpful when I'm taking on a project like this is to establish a few rules for myself. So these are the colors that I have chosen, and these are the only colors that will appear in all of these blocks. These are the Kona colors that just really speak to me. They're my favorite colors. Obviously, I have Kona Pickle in here, but I also have these fun oranges and this bright pink, and then I have two neutrals. This is Kona Snow, and this is Kona Mushroom. Now, these colors may not appeal to you, and that's okay. You don't even have to choose a palette to work with. You can choose another rule for yourself, like putting a curve in every block, or making some stripes in every block, or having one consistent color in every block, like adding black to every single block. It will help unify your quilt, but it is not a rule. If you want to make every block spur of the moment with no rules, then that's awesome too. Another thing I like to do is use the scraps from the previous block to inspire the next block. This was the first block I made, and I made this little striped kind of sequence right here. Then I added some fabrics and elaborated on it, made this little curve. But when I was left over, I had more of these stripes. So when I made my second block, I started with that and the leftover curve that I cut out of this. I combined those to get this block, and now I still have a little bit of this striped fabric left over. It's not a lot, but it's what I'm going to start with to make the next block. I'm also using a lot of Kona Pickle in all of my blocks. I don't know if it's necessarily a background color that I'm using, but it is a major component in each block. And I'm hoping that when I sew all of these blocks together, that Kona Pickle will unify this quilt, and so it will feel like a pickle quilt with all of these flashes of these other colors. So I probably will be adding more pickle to this little striped section that I have. But other than that, I don't have any idea where this block is going to go. I'm just picking up fabric, thinking about if I like it there, and if I do, then I sew it down. So the first thing I do is look at the piece that I am starting with. And it's the striped piece. We have an uneven edge down here. We have kind of a curve going on where I sliced it with a rotary cutter without a ruler. Now I could take this orange that I want to use today and continue the stripe pattern and make a long skinny piece, but I think I want to make more of a square block, square-ish at least. So I have this side that is a little bit uneven. I could trim it off, but it's just an extra step that I don't want to take right now. And I do have this somewhat interesting little curve, so let's work with that. I'm going to do an improv curve here. There are many ways to do an improv curve. I think I'm actually going to grab this bigger piece here to work with. Yeah, that'll give me just a little bit more room to sew this curve. I don't want it that big, so I'm going to just cut off this little piece. And actually, nope, it's not. I'm also going to cut it down to size that way. And I save all these little pieces. These will be incorporated into future blocks. So everything gets reused in improv. So I think what I want to do here is make this curve a little bit more drastic. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take my rotary cutter and make more of an S. I'm cutting through both layers here so that when I remove the little extras, I have these two pieces that fit together. Now these are too small to save, for me at least, so I'm going to throw those in the trash. So now I have this interesting S curve to sew together. If it helps you, you can make a few registration marks. And I'm just making a little dash on either side of that seam so that when I put this right sides together, I have those dots to line up. Now this is an improv curve, which means it is not going to line up perfectly because we don't have those seam allowances built into this curve. So there's going to be some fudging. That's okay. Just sew it together as best you can. and use the registration marks if they help you. If they don't, then just ease those curves together. I'm gonna grab some pins to help me out, and then we'll sew this. If you are new to sewing curves on improv pieces, then shallow curves are going to be your friend. The tighter the curve, like the smaller the circle that would fit into that curve, then the harder it is going to be to ease those curved pieces of fabric together. So if you are just getting started, then a nice gentle arc will be much easier to sew. So these S curves are really the only time I take the time to pin in improv sewing, just because you're reversing that curve and it's just a little trickier to sew. Usually if it's just a regular curve, I'll just sew it, and then if one piece is a little bit longer than the other at the end, as long as it looks okay, I'll just trim off the excess. I don't know if it's the smoothest curve I've ever sewn, but it's flat and it looks fine. I did get a little bit of bunching in one of the seams here, but again, I'm not worried about it. We have our two first pieces together, and now it's time to decide what to do next, if anything. You can stop at any point in improv. So I have this curve here. Maybe I should add something straight on this side. Let's just see. Let's just pick up fabric and lay it down and see what we think. Maybe this light orange. I really like this light aqua next to the orange for some reason. So I think I am going to lop off some of this orange and sew on this little aqua stripe. For these straight lines, if you use the edge of a ruler and cut them both, then you will have a nice straight edge to sew together. Let's see where we are now. So I have added my little aqua stripe and I really like it. I think that this really light color balances this yellow color. Is there anything else I want to do to this block? I could just square it up and call it finished, but I'm trying to use this pickle as a main color in my quilt so that my blocks really blend together. And there doesn't seem to be a lot of pickle on the side of this block, so I think I'm going to add some more. And let's see if I have here's kind of a bigger chunk of pickle. I think maybe we'll add another curve. Why not? I'm just going to add a gentle curve that goes from about here and curves around. So all I'm losing is this little bit, but I think it's going to add some real interest to this block. I also have this little piece here that I'm guessing will end up being the foundation for my next block. You can use a registration mark if you would like, but I'm just going to sew these together and see what happens. When you are sewing these improv curved pieces together without any pins, I'm just taking a moment to align the edges and sew the next small section that I know is aligned. You can see me kind of not exactly stretching that top piece around, but trying to bend it around so that just the edges are aligned. You can see me managing the bulk around that curve, and I know the edges aren't going to line up because we didn't build in seam allowances to these rough pieces. So I'm just going to kind of let it end wherever it ends, and I'll probably be trimming off a little bit of excess. I love it. I love that this curve works with this curve, but they're not the same. I think for me, this block is done. I could keep going. I could maybe sew this over here, but I really like this. I love this pop of aqua here, and I don't want to do anything else to take away from it. I'm going to go ahead and square this block up. And I'm not going to measure it or make it to any size. I'm just going to establish some right angle corners and clean sides so that when I go to sew these blocks together, it's a little bit easier. You do not have to square these up. You could leave this block just as it is right now and do the squaring up when you are assembling your quilt. It's totally up to you. So I like to find an edge to square up first, that's at least the squarest, and then I use that to establish a side across from it. And my ruler here isn't quite big enough, so I'm just using the lines on my mat. Improv blocks are not as perfect as regular pieced blocks, so I think it's fine to use the squares on your mat. If you would rather get a square ruler out, that's fine. So now that I know that these two sides are parallel, I am going to place it on my mat so that the shortest part of this side is just over a line. And then I can square it up to that line. And that just allows me to trim it in the most efficient way so that I'm cutting off the least amount of fabric. And now we have our last side. Now that we know that all the other sides are nice and square, we can find the narrowest point and then trim to there. So this corner is the shortest point, so I'll just cut off the excess from there. So there's our block for today, and here are our previous blocks. So here's our progression. I made the striped fabric, I incorporated it into here, had a little bit left, so I made this. And tomorrow I'll start with this little piece and build a block based on this. So I'm going to wait until I have a quilt's worth of blocks to sew together all at the end, rather than sewing them together in a sequence. Although that would be an interesting way to do it, since you would see these continuations of pieces of the blocks grow from one to the next. Oh, that's kind of making me rethink my plan. What do you think? Should I sew them together in a sequence so you can see these little pieces continue? Or should I wait till the end and mix them all up in a jumble? I'll think about it. But you guys let me know what I should do, and maybe you can convince me either way since I'm so unsure. So I'm going to keep working on my little blocks here, and I will see you again next time. Happy quilting!